Welcome to The Note, I'm Mica.
I'm Ben.
EA has been in the news a lot lately, and none of it has really been that great. Whether it's closing down Visceral Games and their much anticipated Star Wars project, or, putting loot boxes in damn near everything they make, lots of gamers have accused the corporate giant of killing off single-player games in favor of multiplayer, microtransaction-based, pay-to-win extravaganzas. I know that's a lot of fun words, but that's not fun stuff.
They're all over the place. Well, EA's top brass addressed all those controversies in a recent earnings call, and basically they said nothing's our fault.
Great.
And we're going to fix the stuff that is our fault.
Yay!
Oh, and we also learned that EA makes a metric fuck ton of money off of loot boxes, so if you're hoping to see those go away anytime soon, maybe don't get your hopes up.
Okay, so let's talk about Visceral first in that long list of things EA has fucked up. EA recently announced that it closed Visceral Games, an all-star team of developers led by former Uncharted creative director Amy Hennig, who were working on a much-anticipated Star Wars game.
Moment of silence. The game, codenamed Ragtag, was apparently set between the events of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and was going to feature a band of criminals led by a Han Solo-type character named Dodger. But apparently EA didn't like it, saying that it was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game, always terrible, and they needed to pivot the design to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come. Sounds like those multiplayer,
loot box extravaganzas. The closure of Visceral sent shockwaves through the gaming industry, given that it involved EA, a big license, and a well-respected team who people were excited to see make a Star Wars game.
What also troubled people was that in an EA statement about the closure, it sounded like they were scrapping the game because it was a single-player experience and EA wanted a more multiplayer-focused game. And that got people worried that EA is no longer interested in single-player games, which typically makes far less money than a successful multiplayer game. Some former EA employees have pretty much said just as much in recent interviews.
In the earnings call, EA CEO Andrew Wilson talked a little bit more about Visceral's demise and why it happened. He said, during the development process of the game they were working on, we've been testing the game in concert with players, listening to feedback in terms of what and how they wanted to play, and really tracking that closely with fundamental shifts in the marketplace. We're seeing an evolution in the marketplace, and it became clear to us that to deliver an experience that players wanted to come back and enjoy for a long time, that we needed to pivot the design.
As for the single-player and multiplayer debate, Wilson talked about that too, saying it wasn't about this was just a single-player game and it needed to be a live service. It was more about how do we get to a point where the overall gameplay experience was right for players. We still believe strongly in the Star Wars IP.
It smells like fresh corporate speak. I love it. So, according to Wilson, EA felt like the game wasn't tracking with fundamental shifts in the marketplace, and they felt like they needed to do something different, which, again, is not that much different than what we've been hearing.
As for Visceral specifically, Wilson said, anytime you close a studio, it's a very, very tough decision, and something that we take very seriously. We spend a lot of time working through before we make such a decision, but it does happen from time to time as part of the creative process.
But this apparently doesn't mean that we'll never see any of Visceral's work in some form or fashion. Wilson said that EA was happy with some of the assets that Visceral made for its game, and he hopes that they can be used in some new version of the game, which is now in the hands of EA Vancouver, who, if I remember correctly, is in charge of sports.
Well, fingers crossed for my single, no loot box sports experience. Which brings us to EA's other big news Star Wars game, Battlefront II, which releases November 17th. And it's had its own controversies lately, with players complaining that the loot boxes in the game's beta seem to be pretty pay-to-win-ish, since it appeared that you could spend money to acquire high-level items that gave your character a big boost.
EA recently responded to that criticism, saying it will change what's inside of Battlefront 2's loot boxes, removing epic star cards from loot boxes and locking most weapons behind specific milestones instead of loot boxes. They also said that class-specific gear and items can be unlocked simply by playing that class. In short, it looks like EA is actually taking some of the biggest goodies out of loot boxes and making them available through gameplay, but you'll definitely still be able to buy loot boxes with real money if you want, so go ahead and spend $50,000 on stuff.
$50,000. In the earnings call, Wilson, not surprisingly, said that the feedback to Battlefront 2 was very, very positive, but said that EA is listening to feedback and will adjust things to ensure balance.
He also basically said, hey, we're not the only loot boxes that people hate. Okay, he didn't actually say that, but he put it this way. There was the conversation around loot boxes, which is not a Star Wars Battlefront 2 specific conversation, but more one that the industry is having with players across the global community. And we are engaged in that conversation, engaging with our players on a daily basis as we think about that. So pretty much, well, we're not the only ones who do it, so shut up.
I imagine he had this entire conference call on top of just a bed of money.
Yeah, probably.
He also claimed that Battlefront 2, which does have a single-player campaign, will have 3 times the content of 2015's Battlefront, and that its DLC will be free. As for microtransactions, Wilson said that they're a way to enhance and extend their experience, but he added that you can still enjoy Battlefront II for free.
It's no secret as to why loot boxes are in so many games, because they make developers fuck tons of money. And EA's earning call just shed some more light on just how important they are to companies' bottom line.
EA's net revenue for the quarter was $959 million.
Wow.
And more than half of that, $579 million, is from digital revenue.
Double wow.
And the biggest part of that digital revenue is from microtransactions in games like FIFA and Madden, along with Sims 4 and Battlefield 1. Those microtransactions brought in a whopping $310 million.
Ooh.
Meanwhile, traditional packaged retail sales accounted for only about $119 million this past quarter.
So that's why microtransactions aren't going away anytime soon, because they made up almost 1/3 of EA's giant bag of cash.
Money talks.
Meanwhile, we're hearing reports that another EA game, the open world racer Need for Speed Payback, is looking a bit grindy, possibly, to encourage the use of microtransactions. Writing for Game Informer, Imran Khan gave some of his impressions of the game. He called it fun, but said at some point it felt like the game was encouraging players to buy upgrade cards to skip the grind.
He wrote, "The game design seems structured to make the player want to pay for premium shipments in hopes of just avoiding to having to redo races. It's not egregious, as you can simply grind around the problem by redoing races, which is really the primary mechanism of the game. The problem is, I was not having fun doing so, and the use of TDM to encourage people to spend money is not endearing me to the game."
So maybe we're headed to another microtransactions controversy for yet another EA game. Only time will tell. On the bright side, it does look like EA is responsive to the criticism over their business model and, in the case of Battlefront 2 at least, is willing to make changes if a game became too blatantly pay to win.
Counterpoint, that business model is making EA a shit ton of money, and they're not likely to abandon it anytime soon.
So sharpen your pitchforks, everybody. What do you guys think of EA's explanations of closing Visceral as well as the loot box controversy? Let us know in the comments, just sans pitchforks.
And for all of your EA news, be sure to like this video, and if you're new around here, subscribe to the Know.
If you haven't heard, EA recently announced that it closed Visceral Games in an so maybe we're headed to another microtransactions controversy. Wow.
Microtransaction controversy.
In the earnings call, CEA CEO, I hate letters.
EIEIO.